Morning. On behalf of WIN, of the WIN show, Women's Wear in Nevada. That's what the original acronym stood for, in case some of you wonder. California Fashion Association is bringing a retailer's perspective to the current state and the current issues of our post-COVID future. I wish it were totally post-COVID, but let's continue as if it's going to be the year 2022. And I'd like to introduce to you Vincent Iacopella. Vincent is Executive Vice President of Growth and Strategy with Alba Wheels Up. And he will be discussing the supply chain issues. But first, as the California Fashion Association, we're going to just briefly fly through all the things that are aggravating the industry. And this is probably the most flux I've ever seen in my decades of an industry. I hope you have a chance to look at all of this. Each one of these issues demands hours by itself. How things have changed, retailing the new realities, talk about influencers, some legal issues, manufacturing, the issue of sustainability, transformed ownership, the whole issue of reselling, the new technologies and companies. So how things have changed. And you'll just take a look at this slide, 2011, 10 years ago. This was Gucci or any luxury brand, elegant, expensive, and this is Gucci 2021. Who's the customer? Not this customer. The customer is what we call subculture or the rave culture. Here is the club culture, Prada, Givenchy, Courrèges. The fashion of the subculture is expensive. It's not necessarily cheap. It might be fast fashion. They may be getting rid of this stuff into a resale market, but that is fashion today and personified by footwear. Subculture personified are the Doc Martens, which is going public for the first time in 100 years. What we also have is a democracy of consumption. If it's hot at $16, it's also hot at $850. There is no time frame. There is no waiting for something to trickle down. We all must be in, if not we, I'm not in trends, I'm in the business, but in the world of retailing, in the world of trends, you're on it of the moment, whatever price it is. Waiting for it to get down to a price, it's going to be over. So the new realities of retailing, here they are. This is total retail sales. Look at the spike in 2021. The inset, as you can see, is from this point on, from 5:30 on to 6:30. We are way above where we were in 2019. We're way above where we were in 2009. Dropping it down to just clothing and accessory store, in store. This is not online, in store. And you see the spike from the 2020 to where they project it to be in 2021, clothing and accessory. We're on a buying spurt. And the revenue, as you may all know as retailers, it's spiked to women's wear. Menswear is clearly growing. That's the middle dark green. Children's wear will always stay the same because it's controlled by the same amount of retailers. There are very few independent retailers opening up or having been opened. And so that is basically a large store business. But men's apparel is growing. But the channel share of the fashion market might surprise you. We all talk about the internet as the big gorilla in the room, but it isn't. In terms of the channel share of the fashion market, it's still under 30%. Online is less than 30% of what is purchased online. Now, let me clarify these numbers for you because sometimes data is misleading. Nordstrom's online business is in Nordstrom's numbers. It's not broken out. Macy's online business is not broken out. It's Macy's business. So you don't, the online number of 24% scheduled for 2023 is really pure online, just online business. The problem for profit are the returns by category in fashion. 37% of all returns are made because the consumer just didn't like it. That's 37%. That means the other 20% is either fit, fabric, or they're returning it after they wore it, which is very popular right now. But as you can see, clothing and footwear, 56%, this is since COVID, of every package that comes to every door goes back. Very difficult to make a profit. So what you have is the new shape of retailing. In the major retailers, the United States will follow Europe and the rest of the world. There will be leased departments, no multi-brand buyers. Leased department. You want to be in a major store, you own the space and you own the profit of that space. The fun part is the next two, micro branding and clicks to bricks. What's micro branding? It's called digital natives. In 2019, so this is 2 years ago, these were the 50 top digital native brands doing more than $100 million. Each one of these. This is 2021. The 50 top digital native brands doing over $100 million. Now, what do they do between there and there? They go there. Clicks to bricks. To be a digitally native brand and to know that 56% of your merchandise is going to come back, you better look for another way to make a profit, and that is retail, bricks and mortar. And people are asking what is going to fill the space, not only in the mall, but in the independent areas. And that will be brands like this, digital native brands. You will find brands in stores that you've never heard of before. And the people who are booking retail space, who used to only book the Gap and all the brands coming out of St. Louis, or all of those brands are not doing it anymore. They're looking at the digital natives. Now, how do you become a digital native? Influencers. There's no way other than influencers to get your brand across. A page in Vogue and Vanity Fair is $250,000. One time, one page, full color. Influencers. The share of US marketers, now that's not just fashion, all marketing in the United States using social media and influencer marketing, 92%. And of that 92%, 72% are using influencers. Now, this is from November of last year, this data. So this is where we are going and where we continue to go. It is imperative that retailers, large and small, know how to use this influencer marketing message. The Gap is betting the store, truly betting the store on Kanye West. Banana Republic has their own influencer. Yeezy's Gap coat, which was the first product, was shipped in June of this year, okay? $200 nine puffer. It's on eBay for more than $1,000. On a pre-order basis, it hasn't even been shipped yet. Influencer, not a single ad anywhere. Crocs were dead. You couldn't give them away. Justin Bieber is now beyond an influencer. He's got a piece of the action. And Nicki Minaj showed a 4,900% spike in sales for pink Crocs, crashed the retailer's website. Suddenly everyone wanted. That is influencer marketing. Another way, Abercrombie has decided to go TikTok. Influencer is not just Facebook. It's not just Instagram. Here's TikTok. Abercrombie is using brands that are social tourists. That's the Gen Z. What you also have to look at as retailers, as people in the business, whether you're a fashionista or not, is what they're wearing. In the case of a celebrity like Ariana Grande, she doesn't promote a specific brand, but this is her look. And if this is her look, guaranteed it's the look of millions of young people who are following Ariana Grande. So it's a different way for retailers to shop. You're not just shopping a brand or shopping a line, you're shopping a look. What is happening now, next step for influencer, is called micro-influencers. They have a greater level of engagement. Niche authorities. Here's some examples. And in each case, and this is part of the law of influencers, they are paid. They are not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. In the case, there's Lucky Brand, Topshop, Lulu's, Puma, Saks Fifth Avenue, Macy's, Rent the Runway, DSW. Every one of the retailers or the brands are looking for a micro influencer that deals directly with their customer. So again, it's very, very important to know your customer and know who their influencer might be. So who are the real market drivers? Mature customers have the money in the bank. The silver surge, I love that because I'm one of them. But they are the ones that are spending. And they are the least addressed by the influencers today. Social media platforms by US adults, they are still in Facebook. I hear it many, many times from our young clients, the Gen Zs, that Facebook is is not the platform of use. Again, it depends on who your customer is. For the adult or mature social media user, it's still Facebook by 68%. They haven't even figured out how to use TikTok. They, meaning us. So what are the social issues, the legal issues? And I bring this up very, very briefly because we're not lawyers, but you need one. The right of publicity. If you as a retailer see a star pictured by the paparazzi in something that you have in stock, don't put it on your website. Their lawyers will come after you. They have the right of publicity unless they give you permission, to reprint the paparazzi print. And by the way, the other one you need the permission from is the photographer. That band of people with cameras on their hands, they're not there for their health. They get paid for those pictures, and they will get paid by you if you use the pictures. The other thing that is being tracked down, our influencers, when they use their posts as deceptive endorsements, you will find more and more influencers saying, I am paid by this, or there's a hashtag, sponsored post. Look for it because the government is really coming down on the influencers who are not telling the reader or the client that they're being paid. Switching gears now. Let's understand what the manufacturer has to deal with in order for you to put sustainable, organic. Here's what all the phrases are: organic, green, environmental, circular, natural. What can you say about the product in your store without being called greenwashing? What's greenwashing? It's the same as whitewashing. It's saying something just to say it. You can't prove it. The only thing on this page that you have to prove if somebody puts you against the wall is organic. Don't use the word organic unless you can prove it. The others are strictly in the eye of the beholder. So what is sustainability? To avoid greenwashing, you have to back up your environmental and social claims with data. You have to determine which information is to be collected, which to be shared. And as an investor and a consumer, we have different attention spans. Now, how does it affect you as a retailer? If you are saying that the merchandise in your store is environmentally pure and socially conscious, prove it. What does your vendor tell you? Where they have it made? What is the product made of? How is it made? And do you really want to tell everybody everything? You have to determine what to say and how to say it, because your customer and your accountant, I'll call your accountant your investor, and your customer the consumer, they have different attention spans. Your accountant and your lawyer is worried about you having a class action suit brought upon, which is so prevalent in California. But your customer really doesn't care, does she or he? How do you measure sustainability? The only measure, and I say measure, not award, measure, is there's something called the Higgs Index, which was created by Patagonia, Walmart, Target, and North Face 6 years ago. And it measures 100% of a facility, of a brand, and of a product. And it's up to you as a retailer to ask your manufacturer how they measure up in these areas, if you care, But be aware that there is an index by which you can measure sustainability. It is not a stamp of reliability. What is a manufacturer's decisions? What are the questions you could ask? What chemical treatments are being used in the finishing? And by the way, if a pair of jeans is not chemically treated and you sit on a white sofa, that white sofa will be blue. So we have yet to see a true denim pair of pants that does not have some kind of chemical treatment to keep the indigo dye from getting on your stuff. Green packaging, you could have a perfectly natural fiber cotton t-shirt. As soon as you put it in a plastic bag for shipping, which is required by the major stores, it is no longer green. Organic components, you'd have to prove it. Where did they come from? Where did the cotton come from? Transparent factory oversight for labor, very difficult, very difficult. You're an NGO or a non-government group cannot knock on the door of a factory and say, let me in to see how you treat your labor. Unconstitutional. They have the right to say no. The circular economy, to minimize production, well, the more you make, the cheaper it is, guys. I mean, that's the reality. You make one garment at a time and you are wasting 20% of the textiles. So these are decisions that a manufacturer must make. The other thing that you as retailers are aware of and probably contemplating how do you become part of this, transformed ownership is otherwise called reused, recycled, vintage, secondhand, repurposed, upcycled. Now, in my day, we called it junk. But we are now in another world where this is a pattern of retailing. Repurpose versus resale, be very clear of the difference. When you make something out of something else, or you buy or you are reselling something that is that was branded before, There are two different legal issues. Upcycling is another issue where some merchandise is where secondhand is being repurposed, recut up to make a new garment. The environmental impact is small because it's one thing at a time. But here you have the legal issue that comes out of repurposing and upcycling. This was just won by Nike, where a rapper took a Nike shoe and supposedly contained a drop of human blood, called it Mischief, charged $1,000, and Nike came along and said, no way, those are our shoes. It's a Nike product. Whoever pays you $1,000, we get our share. They went all the way to trademark infringement lawsuit over this sneaker. So what you have is, when something is repurposed, please be aware that the original owner of the copyright or trademark is still the owner. They still have a right to any part of the profit being sold if you are using their brand. If you are saying this is somebody's tie. So it's very complicated, but let's look at the reality of secondhand, because this is also known to be something about sustainability and environmentally pure. Well, it isn't. Only 18% is resold without intervention. 38% is resold with some refurbishments, cleaning it up, fixing it up, changing the neckline. 50% of secondhand merchandise is downcycled into insulation, stuffing, or furniture. But even closed for days, which is a secondhand retailer, resale is often just a pit stop on the way to landfill. Here's a picture of something on the way to landfill. ThredUp, the #1 resale budget, we call it budget or moderate price clothing, where all of you can just put it in a bag and ship it at no cost to ThredUp. They get 100,000 items a day and said, this is CBS, more than 30,000 items are sold every day. Well, to me, the math doesn't work. That means 70,000 items are sitting there in inventory. Where is it all going? This is not really environmentally pure. So it's not a perfect solution. If you're in the business of resale, you need a broad assortment. There's a large carbon footprint for shipping one box at a time and the cost of reverse shipping it. And the government is looking at this as cleaning and furbishing. You may have to prove, if you are reselling a secondhand item, that you've cleaned it or handled it in some way. It could be an experiment at a time when fashion retailing is difficult and media attention does not equal success. So we go to technology, again, briefly. What is it? What is PLM, ERP, and CAD? This is for apparel manufacturing, textile design, and pattern making. So I'll just flip through this because I don't think that's our audience. PLM is product lifecycle management. That's from the beginning, from the design room to the showroom. ERP is how you run your business, how you buy it, how you finance it, your distribution system. That's what you need ERP for. CAD, computer-aided design. Without it now, a pattern maker cannot get a job. Design, from design to production, everything is technology now. And the new normal in manufacturing is clearly using all this technology, from 3D, virtual sampling, digital sales, virtual showrooms, vendor integration, knowing where all your vendors are from zippers to thread, and then virtual shows. and social selling. And we have 3D fabrics, new technology now for retailing. Now we're in your ballpark. For retail stores, these are called alternative experiences. Contactless checkout, buy online pickup, BYNPL, guys, you need to know this. It's going to affect your bottom line. Buy now, pay later. It's not just layaway. Buy now meaning walk out of the store and pay later. This is a whole new world. Your customers must be communicated with. Your employees must know what's in the store. They're not just standing there. And there are POS systems. POS systems, this is POS for retailing, point of sale. Retailing has technology. Even an independent store, there are very inexpensive POS systems, but without it, you won't know where you are. Buy now, pay later, 680 billion in transactions worldwide by 2035. And these are the reasons they're doing it. And these are the companies that are helping you. And the banks, by the way, are pulling their hair out. They don't know how to handle this yet. So the question is, who's paying for this? Because you have a retailer where inventory is leaving your premises, but you haven't had full payment for it yet. But think about it, because it's going to be here. Technology, clearly, guys, it's the driver. Technology for all facets of garments. Vincent, are you ready?
Yes, Elsa, thank you. I was mesmerized by this new data, which is fascinating, especially on the new trends. So great job on that.
What we have here is an expert in the reason why you're not getting your merchandise. Why the reason you're giving orders out for November 15th delivery and you may not get it. And what we have is a quick, Vincent, okay if I go through this, or do you want to go through this?
You could go through it. Yeah.
Okay, well, pop in, please.
Yeah.
All right, right now you have an issue with China, the Xinjiang tariff issue, the slave labor of the Muslim people. 1/3 of China's cotton is there, okay? What the issue is the United States Customs has said, in order for you to get anything that says cotton into the United States, you must prove it didn't come from this region. So you have to prove a negative. You have to prove a negative. So you, as a retailer, have to ask, how far up the supply chain is your company able to look and control? It's a big, big issue. For example, Uniqlo, May of this year, big company, US Customs blocked any Uniqlo shirts from coming into the United States. And Uniqlo submitted evidence that their cotton was from Australia, Brazil, and the United States, but they couldn't prove that they sewed it in China without forced labor. And therefore, US Customs has blocked them. This could happen to any of your clients. The required brand due diligence, the client has to review their suppliers, the factory has to have visits, the fabrics have to have sourcing records, and the most challenging of all is that China has denied access to this region and the cotton plantations there. So this is a huge issue. And certainly Vincent can talk more about it, but it is one of the fundamental, it's not the only reason you're not getting your cotton t-shirts, but it's one of the fundamentals.
So Ilse, if I could jump in there. So it is a huge issue. It was an issue that in 2016, when TFTA, the Trade Facilitation Trade Enforcement Act, put a forced labor provision in, but in the last year, there were additional actions by the government to crack down on the Uyghur situation. I would not draw a direct line between Uyghur cotton and the lack of goods, but it is a factor, a multifaceted factor, because there are different things happening with trans-Pacific capacity. But Ilse is right that it is, the scope of this is unprecedented. It's a whole region. It's not specific factories. And the challenge has been that some of this cotton or fabric from cotton that is all over Asia, not just in China. It could be in Bangladesh. It could be in Vietnam. It applies to a lot of this cotton fabric or fibers or yarns could be from that region. So you don't only have to prove it for China cotton. So you may be asked to prove it on the whole scope of cotton and the whole inventory of cotton in Asia. So you do have to go down to the origin level in China, and you do have to prove that it is not of origin from the province. There's a lot of firms, well, not a lot, there's several firms out there that can assist you. It is a high priority action for customs right now. So
just staying on this question, Vincent, if a retailer has an order and the order has been shipped from China or Bangladesh or Vietnam, and there is a cotton component of it, are they comfortable about getting it?
I want to check with the attorneys, because the action on this is newer. And I know that we're going to be talking about this in a future webinar as well with many attorneys that are associated with CFA. Right now, the onus is on the importer of record, right? Which is the person that is the importer into the United States,
right, which
may very well be the company selling to the listeners, right? Or selling to somebody who's selling.
The retailer is usually not the importer of record.
Yeah, it can be in certain cases, but usually not in this audience. The person selling to you may be the importer, or the importer may be a non-resident China company as well. So right now the onus is on the importer. It is strictly enforced. And I think it's going to play out how responsibility trickles down the supply chain. It is definitely an issue you want to ask for compliance purposes, because here's another point that Ilse made. If the importer can't prove compliance, then your goods would get delayed or blocked at the border, right? With the question, right? So there's a liability issue, but so much of this webinar today is about speed to market and getting goods from where they're made to where they're sold, that even if your import is compliant, if it takes them 3 months to prove it, you've missed your season. Right. Exactly.
So which brings us to the main problem that we have for deliveries right now, the supply side, shipping container shortages. And what is the impact of that? Your freight rate increases, equipment shortages, increased congestion, raw materials availability. How does that affect you, the retailer? Okay, so Vincent, take it from here.
Okay.
What deliveries? What are their alternatives? And what do we do for 2022?
So thank you, Ilse. I'm going to follow this great roadmap you gave me on how the listeners would want to talk or hear about this issue. You posed a question previously about where the roadblocks began. I won't spend too much time on that, but I think the context is important.
Yes.
There are definitely systemic issues that existed prior to the pandemic. If you look at 2010, you look at 2017, there were similar systemic issues, such as the use of advanced data by US terminals, having electronic data about manifests early, labor issues on the West Coast with certain ports, night gates versus day gates, land use issues, equipment control issues. But the big factor in 2020 was probably ocean carrier policies on charging demurrage and detention on certain containers that were in port, that maybe your sellers, the people selling to many of the retailers on this call, didn't have access to. And these are not, to Ilse's point, these may not be issues that you felt directly because the people selling to you had to deal with them, but how they may have translated to you was that your deliveries were late or that you're missing inventory, right? So I think the pandemic came on top of that. The pandemic came on top of the China duties that were already in place. And I think you saw first this tremendous supply shock from China, with China shutting down in March and April of 2020. And then you saw tremendous demand shock on the US side. And then later, by June of 2020, we saw that most of the discussions with economists and people that are looking at this have said that a lot of spending shifted from services. People weren't going to restaurants, they weren't going on vacation. They started buying a lot of goods and different types of goods, recreational goods, cosmetics. Apparel was a little soft during the lockdown, but you saw bikes and electronic bikes and camping equipment, obviously health related issues, medical devices, all of that stuff. But there was this huge demand for goods. And there is a question about the summer of 2020, whether ocean freight capacity was actually reinstated at the same rate of demand. And I think that's where we are now, right? There is a tremendous demand for goods, and due to several factors and due to the lack of capacity on trans-Pacific ocean freight, and the Yantian lockdown for 5 weeks in the last 2 months, there is a surge of goods, and demand is outstripping the capacity to move them to North America. So to answer Ilse's question, that's the history. What does it mean?
So how long do you think it'll take for the congestion to abate?
So here's what we're hearing. Yeah, so if you look at the ports numbers, the West Coast ports, if you look at what, I won't mention brand names, but if you look at what the research that's being done by publications and by economists associated with many trade publications, and feedback that my own company is getting from our own offices in China on the ground, that all of you, and I see there's a bullet point for later, but I'll mention it a little bit here. All of you have seen what's happened to freight rates. We won't discuss any specific pricing in this webinar. We could talk about trends, right? So all of you have seen what's happened to freight rates, right? It pretty much looks like rates will increase until at least the first week in September, continue to increase incrementally. This is just a projection. It's not written in stone. And then once you hit September, many don't see a decrease. They see a plateau or a leveling off, because they really don't see, they see demand plateauing. We don't necessarily see demand decreasing, right? And then most are saying, if you look at the ports, if you look at private sector, if you look at the PMI index in Asia for raw goods going in and out of China, it looks like you'll have this capacity demand until Chinese New Year 2022, right? So this is something that we're all going to have to deal with from now at least to the first quarter of 2022.
So so the question is, if retailers are going to market now, July and August, what deliveries will they get merchandise from imported merchandise? Let's just imported merchandise for Christmas selling by November 15th.
So this is the big question.
Right.
This is my whole life this summer. I mean, if you look at my AT&T bill for China every night, couple hours. So this is obviously when I speak to my customers who have very hot products, uh, electronic bikes, certain fashion that's coming back, uh, demands for certain accessories in fashion. Ilse and I had this discussion offline. That's coming back. If I look at recreational goods, health and exercise, cosmetics, other goods, still medical devices, still, and generally consumer electronics, very strong as well, right? So if you look at all of those things coming back, everybody has one, including the apparel folks. The one theme I keep hearing is inventory is key. Whoever has inventory now and for the fall kind of wins. They've already had, many have had real hits to margin because of the unbudgeted freight cost and the delays and all of that. But it's still key to get inventory here and preserve the relationship with all of you retailers, to show that they can get inventory so you all can sell it, right? And the strategy for right now, I think for the summer and the fall, is I need to get inventory here so I can prove to my consumers, direct to consumer, many are selling direct to consumer, many are selling to brick and mortar, so I can prove to whoever I'm selling to that I can get speed to market. I can get inventory to market. I think the strategy there is that in Q1 of 2022, they'll have those relationships preserved, and then they will be able to move inventory in a more conventional way, right? And that they would have a better 2022. They've already gotten a hit on margin for 2021, right? So the key is you got to get your inventory here. And
so the question, I'm sorry to interrupt. The question a retailer should ask their vendor is, where is your inventory being held? Is that the question?
I think that is a good question, and I see a more detailed discussion about this, about nearshoring, right, further down. I think that is an absolutely essential question. You may have to ask questions during this period that you weren't used to asking before, right? Because you used to place the order and used to say, you know, it's your responsibility to get it to me by ship date, to get it to me by SI cutoff, all that stuff. But you really have to be engaged and to know what their supply chain looks like, because there's so many things out of their control in that supply chain, right? So to Ilse's point, where are the goods? Is this North American inventory? Do you have them in inventory in the US? Are they in inventory in northern Mexico waiting to be entered, which is safer? Are they still in China? Because if they are in China, they should be able to communicate a strategy to you or how they're going to get them to North America, right? Like what strategies, and we have 3 or 4 strategies we could talk about today. But really, these are strategies that need to be employed by the companies that are selling these goods to you. So yes, I did. The number one question is, where is your inventory? What is your strategy about getting it to market?
So what are the alternatives? What are the alternative sourcing options?
None of these, well, I'm going to stick with China sourcing and then I'm going to move. So with China sourcing, none of these is a silver bullet, but in combination together, they have been mitigating some of the challenges. So number one, you know, planning and allocating space 3 to 4 weeks in advance instead of going on the market the week they want to ship is helpful. We and others have been successful in getting space in 3 to 4 week ramp up. Right? So number one, if you're doing it directly, if your vendor is handling the Trans-Pacific portion, then they should be planning early in China. I mean, that was always the case, but now it's crucial, right? So we can block out 4 to 8 weeks in advance. Secondly, maybe you and your vendor should be flexible about entry points. So if LA is jammed up, go to Oakland, go to Seattle, consider Vancouver and coming down. You may think that that's a little bit of a outside of the box or outside of your model, but if you can, most big sellers that I know, U.S. resellers, will probably take ocean containers in any U.S. port right now, provided that they can make sense of it. The reverse is true. I'll give you a quick example, like Ningbo and Shanghai. Most people will ship out of Ningbo or Shanghai interchangeably, right? So the bottom line is flexibility in the supply chain. Number three, if you have a really small run, I would look at air freight, right?
That was my next question.
Yeah, if you have a smaller run and you have a smaller boutique and your orders are smaller, I would definitely look at air freight, because that would, almost immediately alleviate the problem. And then the third one, which kind of bleeds into another bullet point that Ilse mentioned, was that I have a lot of people for November 15th coming to us saying, well, if I can move it in July or August, and I can move it into a bonded facility or an IMX facility in northern Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I could cross it into the US as it sells to consumer or as I sell to retailer. And this way, I don't pay the duties until I cross, but the inventory is much closer to my consumer instead of being across the ocean. There are a couple of folks I know that are talking about bringing Black Friday in August and July and not waiting for that just-in-time cutoff, if that makes sense.
Well, how do you know whether someone has the facility for that kind of free trade zone?
So they are more accessible with third-party vendors now. The seller doesn't have to have all the infrastructure on their own. They can partner with a company like ours or other companies that offer that. We offer that on our direct-to-consumer service, but now we're seeing it in the retailers too. There are U.S. resellers that are importers that are sourcing overseas in China and other parts of Asia that are looking at the value of keeping that inventory in North America earlier, right? And we also noticed a trend where a year ago, nobody wanted inventory at all, right?
Right.
And now we're noticing that, hey, guess what? People are warming up to keeping a larger inventory in North America again. I don't know, Ilse, if you're seeing that as well, but I am.
We're seeing that is the need, but the banks and the factors are reticent about the reality of keeping that inventory, and they're the ones who've been pressing for no inventory. So you have a disconnect right now with the needs of retailing. Not only that, but the buy now, pay later concept, which is not only from B2C, but also B2B, buy now, pay later. No one's kept up with financing this yet. So you're absolutely right that is an alternative sourcing option. But money is the factor there, because you're buying and paying for inventory and not shipping it out or getting paid for it. And then the retailers and our audience of retailers are really going from 30 days to 60 days to 120 days. So the whole issue of where is the money, that's a separate webinar. Okay.
I think it is. And you know what?
Well, it is. We're calling it financing fashion. It is a whole big issue to be discussed, but the solution is to buy from inventory. So then if you're a designer, merchandiser, online operation, I will assume that a good percentage of our listeners have online operations, and the online buyer, the B2B, they don't wait for 6 weeks. In other words, if you're showing it on your website, you need to ship it out that day. How do they manage this crisis?
Yeah. So first of all, the financing piece you've mentioned is huge. And when I look at some of the companies out there in the market that have factoring or financing, on a large scale, it does take a discussion with those companies about that. And I wonder, to your point, how a middle market company might handle that. And I think that is a huge issue. Secondly, I don't know if we're seeing it immediately because everything that's hitting the shore right now is sold, right? So even things that were supposed to be in inventory really yet aren't going in inventory. They're going straight to consumer or straight to retailer. But if you, to Ilse's point, if you want to employ a nearshoring strategy where you would have inventory in North America, you would definitely run into this issue, right, with the financing for sure. So definitely something to be looked at going forward.
So the timeline for the resolution, do we see this to be the new normal? Or are we looking at 2023?
I've been asked this question. I've asked this question. I've been on panels with smarter people than me, and no one can say definitively. And I think it's harder for folks to predict consumer behavior because there's so many issues at work. There's consumer behavior, consumer spending behavior, how people buy things. There's the trans-Pacific capacity issues. There's still some COVID issues out there in certain markets globally. There's all the port labor issues we talked about. There's carrier policy. So what I would say is many are predicting this level of demand into Q1 2022, and most are predicting some sort of leveling off or plateauing in Q1 2020, maybe a plateau in Q3 or Q4 of 2021, but maybe the beginning of a correction of capacity pricing Q1 2022. But this is kind of an unprecedented situation, and we had been told earlier in the year that we thought that things would level off in September of this year, right? Which right. Technically could still happen. So I think it's something that we have to deal with at least for the rest of 2021 and the beginning of 2022. And I think 2022. I'm reticent to say that this is going to continue all the way through 2022, but who knows?
Are there? We're going to open this up. Paige, are you there? Do you want to open it up to questions? Are there any questions? We can open a chat room.
Sure. If any of our attendees wanted to jump in and add some questions to the chat, feel free. We'll give you a couple minutes. I know we covered a lot here.
Yes, we have. And if there are any questions after this, feel free to contact us. Paige will send on any questions, and we'll be glad to try and answer them to the best of our ability. We have no crystal ball, but these are just the facts, guys. We don't make things up. Love to hear from you. Is there a tape of this? We are being taped. Is that correct, Paige?
Yep. Yeah. So between your association and us, we'll send it out to everyone who's interested in seeing the replay. I know sometimes it's easier to scrub through to the good nuggets that they're looking for. So we'll definitely send it around, and I'll be in touch with any questions. Doesn't look like anything's coming in, but I think everyone might just be taking it in.
Okay. Well, I know that each of these issues is a program by itself. I mean, clearly the data and the statistics needs to be analyzed individually, as is sustainability and transformed ownership and the legal issues. So we'd love to give you any information. Is product demand the only reason why container sales are now? Vince, do you see this question?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that because I get asked.
Yeah, would you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Is product demand the only reason why container rates are now between $18,000 and $20,000? I get asked this question every webinar, and I will say that I was a skeptic in the beginning that demand could, I had this discussion with Ilse that demand could create all this, but it really looks, these goods are being produced, these goods are being shipped, and it's constant. So I would say that demand is there because people would not be manufacturing these goods so far if they weren't able to sell them. So they're selling these goods, number one. So demand is there. I think on top of the demand, to be fair, are the systemic issues I mentioned previously, which is how is Trans-Pacific ocean capacity managed? Is data being leveraged properly? How are U.S. ports, should U.S. ports work 24/7? But also I heard something interesting if you want to get back to demand. There are some economists out there saying that as the economy opens up in the US and people start spending on services again, like they go to restaurants, they go on vacation, they spend money on airfare, that you might see a shift away from the demand for goods. And I think we'll have to see what happens in that.
Vince, you might speak to the effect of the Suez Canal and where those containers went.
There are so many issues. There's Suez. There's the closure of Yantian in the early summer, which really created a backlog in South China on top of the demand issues. And that's why I talk about these systemic issues, right? There's still pandemic-related issues about labor in these origin ports. If a port has to shut down or not have as many staff. And you know what one of the biggest issues is that we're also not moving goods through the supply chain on the U.S. side. The U.S. rail is backed up. U.S. truck engines are backed up.
Yeah,
so this equipment is not going back. This empty equipment is not going back to the carriers as quickly as it used to, right? So all of this together, I believe, is having an effect on top of demand.
And are these rate hikes artificial or political? I think neither, Raphael. I don't think the rate hikes are artificial or political. The fact of the matter is, and Vincent, the United States does not own a shipping line. We do not own a single piece of ocean freight carrier. We are at the behest of the people who do, and it's not just China. Portugal owns ships. I mean, we don't own them. So we have no control over these. And when there is full demand and full containers, the rates go up.
I could say this, Mr. Raphael.
Well,
I could say this. I don't know the context of the answer to his specific question, but I will say that the Federal Maritime Commission was looking at Trans-Pacific practices. They still are. There's legislation being considered on the Hill, and there was a last week, President Biden issued an executive order about these practices. So to Ilse is 100% right. You heard me mention carrier policy earlier. When I talk about carrier policy, these are the decisions that folks make about when they're going to charge demurrage, when they're not. But interestingly enough, this new cost is not demurrage and detention. It's the actual cost of moving the goods. So many are saying that is market driven. But to Ilse's point, capacity can be controlled, right? The people who control capacity can make decisions about where to put ships into Europe or into North America or other places. So I think it's a combination of all these things. And there are many breakout webinars specifically on this subject that if you email me, I can refer you to.
Right. Renee, I'll talk to you about the legal issues of social media for the students. We have a whole program on that. So I'll get back to you on that. Okay.
Excellent. I think that's it for our questions. And like I said, I'll definitely forward off to you if we have any more. But
Okay.
Ilse and Vince, thank you guys so much. And hopefully we can expect to see everybody at WWIN in just a few short weeks for some more education. So anything else you guys wanted to add as a last takeaway?
No, it was just lovely to be invited, and I look forward to seeing you. I will be in Las Vegas, and I will come over to Caesar's Palace to see the WWIN show. Okay?
Thank you
Vince,
all.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. It was great. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.